All right. So this presentation is in two parts because I know that there's going to be a mixture in the audience of people who are already familiar with Globus and have used it, are using it at their institution or at their laboratory or facility, and those who may never have heard of it before. So the first part will just be a very brief introduction to what Globus is, and I'll give a brief demonstration just to show you that it really is as easy as I'm making it sound. And then the second part will be an update on what some of the recent changes are that we've made. So even if you are already a Globus user, you might find something in there that we can do now that you didn't know we could do. So the first thing I want to do is tell the story of what is the problem we're trying to solve. This may be a little bit of a detour from the discussions of the morning. Because what we're really focused on is kind of a mundane problem that comes up. It's an offshoot of high-performance computing, and it has, I like to think of it as data wrangling. Basically, what do you do with all this data that you're generating in your high-performance computing systems? You will remember from this morning, I can't remember if it was Earl or your colleague who was giving the slide that showed that was it high-performance data analysis? Ah, okay. Was that what HPDA stood for? Yeah, data analysis. The slide that showed that 50% in two different groups, 25 and 25%, of people who are doing high-performance data analysis said that they were already or were as soon as possible going to be using different systems for their data analysis from their HPC activities. That raises the question, well, how do you get the data from one to the other? And this is something that comes up a lot. So we start out, and I'll back up a second. What we're really trying to do with Globus is make it as easy as possible, as frictionless as possible for researchers, particularly researchers at academic institutions, to wrangle their data, to get their data where it needs to be, when it needs to be, and as easily and in the form that it needs to be. So we start out with something really simple. Data is being produced on some instrument somewhere. When I say instrument, I could mean either an actual experiment that's running somewhere, a physical facility, a physical experiment. Could be a simulation, could be a simulation running in a lab on campus, or it could be one at a national facility. But the point is that it's generating data. And the idea is that the researcher, the person who is creating this data, needs to get it to somewhere so that they can do data analysis on it. So the first step is to get the data from one place to the other. We're trying to make that simple. I'm going to move this down slightly. We're trying to make that simple by reducing as much as possible what needs to be installed at these places. Because we found over 20 years now of working with scientists that the more you have them install and manage themselves, the more trouble they have, and the harder it gets, and the less science gets done, which ultimately is what's driving our work. So we've created this thing called Globus Connect. Globus Connect comes in two versions. It's a software package. One version is designed to be installed on personal systems or individual systems for individual use. So that would be, for example, I have Globus Connect running on my laptop. And that lets me use it, but nobody else. There's another version called Globus Connect Server, which is typically installed by a system administrator, and that's what you'll find running at HPC centers. That's what you'll find running at large facilities. But the bottom line is, all they really do is they give access to the system to the Globus application. So the researcher should be able to initiate a transfer request and then rely on the Globus service, which is something that runs in the cloud. It actually runs on Amazon EC2. And it talks to those two Globus Connect services and makes sure that the data gets from one place to the other. Okay, that's the next step. As I go through these slides, I want you to notice that Globus Connect shows up in a number of places, and it's always the same thing. It's either Globus Connect Personal or Globus Connect Server. And then the arrows, or the lines with arrows on them, everything that's there with a line and an arrow is intended to be something that a scientist can do with their web browser and nothing else. So you should be able to open up your web browser. If you've got Globus Connect installed in the right places, you don't have to install anything else. You don't have to do anything other than interact with your web browser. It should be that easy. I mean, you can use other interfaces if you want to, but it's supposed to be easy. After the data is analyzed, the next step is to share it. And that usually involves talking to the Globus Connect, the Globus service, and telling it that you want part of the data that's on at the compute facility to be shareable. Let's see, how is this set up? Right. So what that results in is that a collaborator at another institution who probably does not use the same accounting system as the original researcher, who probably doesn't, probably has different accounts at the compute facility, their home institution, et cetera. It allows them to access the data where it was analyzed and transfer it perhaps to their local system. Maybe they have another compute facility they need it moved to in order to do their own data analysis on it. Whatever they have to do, they need to get it somewhere else. This is done with sharing. One of the things that we do with Globus that's unique is that we do not require this collaborator. Do I have a pointer here? Yes, I do. Does not require this collaborator here to actually have an account on this system. The researcher here basically sets up something here called a share, and the sharing and the access is set up in Globus. It's not set up in the accounting system at the compute facility. What that means is that this guy needs to be known to Globus. They don't need to be known to that compute facility where the data is stored in order to access their collaborators' data. Next step, of course, is publication. One of the things that is becoming more important with scientific publication and research publication is sharing your data. And so not only do you need to publish your paper, but you also need to make the data available somewhere. And Globus also helps with that in a service we call Globus Publication. Basically what that allows researchers to do is to define basically a set of data, set of directories and the files in them, add metadata to that using whatever form of metadata they use in their particular scientific field. We're pretty much schema agnostic, but we do allow people to enforce their own schema. And then arrange for both the metadata and the data itself to be moved into a long-term repository, which is probably hosted in a research library or a data facility. So that's the whole life cycle that we're trying to enable with Globus. And all of it is available in some form today. I'd like to show you in just a second how it's really easy to, oh, what is this? Oh, curator, oh, sorry. Yeah, I guess they're important too, but not right now. Let's see. Oh, yes. For all of these things, we want to make it so that from the scientist's perspective, you only need your web browser. You need somebody to install your Globus Connect, either on your system or the systems that you use. You get to use whatever storage system you like. We don't care what type of storage system is available at these places. We have a lot of different connectors that connect to different storage systems behind Globus Connect. And ideally, you should be able to use credentials that you already have and not have to set up new accounts. In fact, Globus itself does not require you to set up an account to use it, which is going to sound strange to you because I told you earlier that that guy didn't need to be known to anybody but Globus in order for sharing to work. Well, you'll see how that works in a second. Before I go any further, though, I want to give you a sense of where we are in terms of our development and deployment. Globus is used by a lot of people in a lot of places. There are currently more than 50,000 registered users. Those are researchers who are moving their data around using Globus. About 10,000 of them are active, meaning that they've used the system in the last month or so. We have a lot of active use. This number here, this 10,000 number of active endpoints, those are data places where data is stored that are known to Globus. So those are people have registered their data location. They got a server running, and they've told Globus about it. Globus Connect is working on all of that. This next number over here, 300 identity providers, is also important. I mentioned that you should be able to use your campus credentials. Right now, there are more than 300 campuses, most of them part of the In Common Federation, that you can use to identify yourself to Globus without having to create any new account. I can, for example, log into Globus using my University of Chicago local credentials and not have to register with Globus at all. A lot of data has been moved. Where's the data? 258 petabytes so far. That's historical. That's over the last couple years, maybe 3 years since we started running the thing. And the 99.5% uptime, I want to make one point of clarification about that. That's about 2 days of downtime a year, which is not too bad, particularly in the academic research world. But I want to point out that that does not mean that the system comes to a grinding halt for 2 days every year. When the system is quote unquote down, transfers that people have in flight continue. Because those are those are arranged or negotiated between the places where the data is stored. When that 99.5% uptime basically refers to being able to log into Globus's web application and start new transfers or check the status of transfers. And so actually, basically the system is always doing something. If you include the Globus Connect servers at all those 10,000 different active endpoints that are out there. One final point I wanted to make about this. Globus is a nonprofit cost center that's housed at the University of Chicago. We operate under what we call a freemium model. A lot of other people use that term. We didn't make it up. But basically, what it means is that the basic services, the basic ability to do things with Globus is free. It doesn't cost anything to install Globus Connect on your system, whether it's a high-end server or whether it's your laptop. You can move files around, unlimited use. There's no limit on how much volume you do. What we do charge for and have subscriptions for are what we call premium services, which are basically specialized things. So when people start to use the service and say, wow, this would be really cool if I could do this, which is something that's special for them, that's when we start talking to them about possibly getting a subscription. We are currently about 50% self-sustaining. And so that means about half of our money comes from subscribers, and about half of it still comes from grants and other contracts that we have with organizations to support our development and operation. Our goal, of course, is to get to 100%. We want to be able to eventually stop writing grant proposals and things like that, and instead be supported simply by people who are using our services. I'm going to skip over this. Okay, I'd like to go ahead and use somebody else's laptop to do a demonstration. There we go. Okay, great. Thank you. Now, one thing that's going to be a little rough about this demo, hopefully it won't be rough at all, but one thing that is going to be a little rough is that, what's that?
I just have a spell check there.
You're going to check my spelling too? Come on. Okay. that I'm going to be referring to my phone here where I have my password stored, because you don't have 1Password with my database attached to it. I hope not, yeah. And so when I actually go to log into University of Chicago, I don't know my Chicago password. I have to read it off of the screen. So I'll be doing that. So I just want to warn you about that. It's not really as complicated as it looks. Let's see. I'm going to click the login button here on Globus. This is just globus.org. What is wrong with your web browser? Am I hitting the right button or what? Oh, there it goes.
Right there it's showing it's just slow connection.
It's just slow. Okay. The first thing it's going to need me to do is to authenticate, to tell it who I am. So I'm going to do that. The nice thing about this is that, like I said, we have more than 300 institutions already signed up. So all I have to do is type in the first part of Chicago, and voila, there's University of Chicago. Thanks to CI Logon, I will be able to go to University of Chicago, enter my CNET ID, which I do know, whoops, but you don't know how to spell.
You have to hit return again.
Oh, okay.
Interrupted your return.
Okay, and now I type in my very long, nasty, I'm really good at this, don't worry. It probably won't get it wrong. That's a weird symbol, go away. No, it won't spell check, I promise. Because if it did, I would get yelled at. Okay, there we go. And you think I can just hit return? No. Try it again. I'll try this twice, and if it doesn't work, then I'll skip the demo. But I hope you'll see that it's really, if I can, why does it, I think it's that. I think it's your spell checker.
You may want to change your password out. Yeah. Or at least the front half. Yeah, especially with this label right here.
Well, the good thing is I can do that, and because I never knew it to begin with, it won't make any difference to me, right? Oh, please.
Yeah, whenever you hit a return, it does. But it shouldn't have to. Okay.
Well, that's irritating. Let's just make sure that it really is L-liming and not liming, because sometimes...
The spell checker should go.
Oh, thank you. I hate it when this happens. Let's see. 32. Yeah. It's in there somewhere, but you don't know where. One more time. Now it's waiting for Shibboleth. That's a good sign.
I don't want to memorize your password.
No, don't. Yeah, please don't. Well, why is Shibboleth taking so long? I'd like to at least show you what it looks like to move a file. Okay, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the slides. Where am I? Here we are.
I might just add, while you're
Yeah.
trying to find the slides, is that we use it extensively at the City University of New York, and it's great for large file transfers.
Oh, this.
And
Yeah.
it's reliable, it's encrypted, and...
It's very well encrypted, as you can see.
And it's pretty impervious to transmission hiccups. It
Yeah, what-
automatically restarts itself if there's an interruption.
So two things I was going to show you that are probably, I don't know if that's ever going to come back from Shibboleth or not, but that's something to do with the network here, I assume. Two things I was going to show you. One of them is that because we let people look up their endpoints by name, it's really easy to find your endpoint. You don't have to know a host name. So for example, it's really easy for me to click on, pick the endpoint for this side of the transfer, and usually I can just say, for example, I can type in Midway to find University of Chicago's Midway, the Research Computing Center's system, and it just logs me in. That's usually because I've just logged in with the University of Chicago to get in Globus in the first place, and so it can do that easily. If the other endpoint is, the example I was going to use was Wrangler at TAC, the Texas Advanced Computing Center's Wrangler system. I can just type in Wrangler on the other side, and up come a list of endpoints that have Wrangler in their name, and I pick the one that I know is mine, and it'll then ask me to authenticate to Wrangler, and then I'm good to go. And then I can move things back and forth. One of the nice things about Globus is that it doesn't matter if you're moving a single file or if you're moving a whole directory tree. Last night, I was doing both. ESNet is very helpful in that the Energy Sciences Network, that they have test nodes that have test data sets, and so I was just flying data sets back and forth between Midway and Wrangler, and it was really nice. Okay, so having failed to show you how easy to use Globus is, I hope you'll take my word for it. I am going to move into new features and enhancements and just breeze through these. One of them is storage connectors. So we already have, and this is all part of the free service, connectors for Linux, Windows, and Mac, Lustre, GPFS, OrangeFS, et cetera. So if you're using any of those as your backend storage system, you're great. You can use it with the free service. But we are adding additional ones that will require subscriptions. All of them except for the last three, HDFS, iRods, and HGST, all of those are available now. One of the newest ones to be added was Google Drive, which probably won't be terribly interesting to any of you, but to a lot of people on campuses, particularly campuses that use Google's G Suite, they really, really like that, the ability to connect their Google Drive to Globus so that they can move things back and forth between their science sites and their Google stuff. A lot of parallel file systems being worked on and added to this suite. Take note of the URL at the bottom. These slides will be available to you online after this meeting. Every one of these new feature slides has one of those URLs at the bottom that you can go to for details about any of this stuff. Logging in. We recently added ORCID IDs to log in, so you can now log into Globus using your ORCID ID if you have one. That's people who do lots of papers, typically have an ORCID ID to hook up with all their papers. Very useful. OpenID Connect compliance. I said that there are about 300 identity providers right now. That's going to very shortly increase to 1,200. So basically quadrupling the number of institutions you can log into Globus with. And also the ability to add email aliases to the identities that you link up in Globus. One of the features of Globus is you can link identities from multiple institutions. So for example, I can link my University of Chicago identity, my Exceed identity, my TAC identity up, and other people who want to share things with me may not know which identities I'm using, and so the ability to add aliases, email aliases and things, is really a nice user-friendly feature, because then people don't have to know how I'm using Globus in order to share things with me. We have a new command line interface. Globus, for the last few years, has had a command line interface that you could use through SSH. So basically, you SSH'd to us and gave commands. And that was an attempt to basically have a zero install command line. So you didn't have to install anything on your system except an SSH client. Now we're upgrading and we're using our Python software development kit. So you will need to have Python in order to use this CLI, but it's a lot more powerful. It's also open source and available through GitHub. And again, it's free. The Python SDK itself is really useful. A lot of scientific and research groups are using this Python software development kit to automate things in Globus, automate data movement in particular, and I'll show you a couple slides about that in a sec. Our management console has been upgraded recently. This is basically where if you are running an endpoint that has Globus Connect on it, you can see who's moving things to and from your system and where they're going. You can't see what it is because that's a privacy issue, but you can at least see sizes and usage information and performance. And you can also manage who in your organization has access to this management console yourself. So you don't have to go to our help desk and say, can you please give Joe access to our management console anymore? HTTP access to our endpoints. A lot of people want to just be able to download from their browser rather than having to have a Globus Connect installed, and that's something that we are adding in the next couple months. And I also wanted to make sure that I put up the training thing. So if you are interested in Globus and finding out more about it, we have a lot of events going on this year where you can find out more about Globus, including how to use this nifty SDK and automate things. Let me just double check. Yeah, that was what I thought was there. I'm going to leave this up and not talk through it very much, and just say that the next thing for people using Globus is basically automating their use of Globus. So a lot of the national laboratories are beginning to automate the process of moving things off of instruments into analysis areas and then eventually back to home institutions for users in their own custom interfaces, and they're using our SDK to build that. I think that's all I need to say.
Okay, Lee, thank you. And we're not going to take any questions.